Mr. Luckman and I welcome you to another discussion of the great ideas. Today, we continue with the consideration of the great idea, love. And as we do so, I would like to remind you of four things as background for today's discussion. The first is the distinction, the difference, or the contrast between two kinds of love. Sexual, erotic, or carnal love on the one hand, and friendly or fraternal love on the other. These two kinds of love are often fused. It is very difficult sometimes to separate them. And that is why I would like to propose an experiment, as I've once proposed before, an experiment in thinking about love in which we create for ourselves, at some points in this discussion, an imaginary world, a world without sex, so that we can see the difference between, or the separation of love and desire. In such a world, there would be desire, on the one hand, such desires as hunger and thirst, and there would be, on the other hand, love. Love, the kind of love that exists between friends, brotherly love, the love of patriots of their country, Christian love. And not only would love and desire be quite separate, but they would appear, I think, to be sharply opposed to one another, as liking is to wanting, or as giving is to getting. One can see these two things, love and desire, as impulses moving in opposite directions. The impulses of love being generous and benevolent, giving to the other, the impulses of desire being selfish and acquisitive, getting something for oneself. Now, today's discussion centers on love as fraternal or friendly, the brotherly love or friendship which is quite independent, is not rooted in acquisitive desires.
Dr. Adler, I want to stay with you in this discussion, but to do so, there's something I really have to know, and I think a lot of other people do too, and that is, in which world are we going to carry on this discussion? The real world or your imaginary world without sex?
Well, let's start off, Mr. Luckman, where we really are in the real world, and then when it becomes necessary for us to move into the imaginary world, the world without sex, I will give you notice so that you have plenty of time to get your imaginations in tune with mine. Now, I'd like to begin by giving you, very briefly, Aristotle's account of the reasons why men associate with one another. He says that men value three things. They value things for their utility. They value things as pleasant or as sources of pleasure. And they value things for their intrinsic excellence. They value them as they are honorable or admirable. And accordingly, he points out, there are three types of human relationship or association. Let me show you this in a chart. There are those human associations which are based on utility, such things as all business relationships for the most part, political alliances, and marriages of convenience. Then there are human associations that are based on pleasure, such things as sexual attachments, infatuations, or perhaps one might even add all the instances of conviviality, the conviviality of bon vivants. And finally, third place, there are human associations based on the excellence of the persons themselves. These are the friendships of persons who mutually admire and respect one another, mutual friendships. Now, Aristotle's thesis is that the first of these three associations is not love at all, and that the second, when it is separated from the third, is not love either, and that only the third is love, truly, deeply love, and that it is love without any admixture of the second or the first. Let me see if I can tell you why Aristotle says that. Let me see if I can explain this basic point that he makes. First, he points out that the first two relationships, the relationships, human associations based on utility and pleasure, bear some resemblance to true love. They're almost counterfeits of that love, because they do involve some mutuality. Mere desire involves no mutuality at all. When I desire a steak, the steak doesn't desire me in return. But in these cases of friendships or associations based on utility or pleasure, there is some mutuality. But then he goes on to point out that this resemblance is very superficial, because in a case of associations based on utility or relations based on pleasure, there is a condition of give and take. The relation is one of quid pro quo. It is a matter of fair exchange. I give you this, you give me that. I please you, you please me. As a result, these associations are very precarious and unstable. In contrast to love, which is deeply permanent. You all know that wonderful line in Shakespeare's sonnet, "Love is not love that alters when it alteration finds." And finally, Aristotle makes the point that whereas the first two relationships, that based on utility, that based on pleasure, arise, have their root in desire, the third relationship, the relationship which is based upon the excellence of the persons who are associated. It does not arise from desire, but if anything, there is a friendship which is itself the source of some wish or desire.
Well, Dr. Adler, would you recall that you said at the beginning that love differs from desire as giving differs from getting? Now you speak of love as being the root or source of some desire. Do you mean a desire then to give as distinguished from a desire to get?
Precisely, Mr. Luckman. The desire to give, the benevolent wish or impulse, is the very essence of loving. Now, loving someone may involve more than this wish to give, but it must involve that at least. If one does not have the impulse to benefit the other, to give something to the other, to do something good for the other, then one is not in love. Now, there are various ways of making this point, of saying this thing. All seem to be phrases that express the same point. We can talk about benevolent impulses, generous impulses, the wish to benefit the other, the person loved, the desire to give, or we can speak of, as one does, goodwill toward men. But as soon as one mentions goodwill, a question arises. Is love the only source of goodwill? What about justice? Do we not think in general that when a man is just to his fellow men, that he has goodwill toward them? And so we are faced with the question, what is the difference between the goodwill, which is the loving will, and the goodwill, which is the just will? What's that difference? And I think the answer to that question is very illuminating about the nature of love. The answer is that in loving, we give without getting in return. We are not asking for a fair exchange. We give what is not owed, what is not due to the other person. That's why, on the whole, we think that it is better to have loved and lost than not to have loved at all. And that's why many men continue to be in love with other persons, continue to love, even though their love is not requited. Let me see if I can give you a more concrete explanation of this point of the difference between love and justice. When someone does not love us as we would like them to, we don't say, be fair to us, be just to us. Rather, we ask them to care for us, to show us consideration. We demand justice from our fellow men. We have a right to demand it. Justice is ours by right, but we don't demand love. We have no right to make that demand. When it is love we want, it is not a demand we make, we beg. We plead for love. Now let me see if I can summarize this distinction between justice and love, because I think it throws a great deal of light on the nature of love. As I said a moment ago, both justice and love involve goodwill towards one's fellow men. Then, How do they differ? Well, I think this chart I'm going to show you summarizes that difference. In this chart, one can see the difference between justice and love as one goes down in the two columns. Justice consists in paying one's debts. Love consists in giving gifts. Justice consists of acts which are obligatory. We are under obligation to be just. Love consists in acts which are gratuitous, acts we do not have to do. We do from love and love alone. Justice consists in acts of fairness, in being fair to our fellow men. Love consists in acts of consideration, in showing them consideration. Now, all one has to do, I think, is to think of heroic examples of love, to see how different they are from dutiful acts of justice. Let me take, for a moment, that legendary hero of ancient Rome, Marcus Curtius, who threw himself into a chasm in the Roman Forum in order to fill it up. Look at this picture. Here is a print showing Marcus Curtius plunging his horse and himself into this chasm in the center of the Roman Forum in order to fill the chasm. It had been prophesied that unless Rome's most precious possession was thrown into the chasm, it would never fill. And Marcus Curtius thought that Rome's most precious possession was its good citizens. And so he sacrificed himself for his country. Or think of an American hero. Here is a picture of Nathan Hale. This picture is a picture of the statue of Nathan Hale, which stands in New York, at the bottom of which are written Nathan Hale's last words, which you remember are, "My only regret is that I have but one life to give for my country." Now, these two examples, I think, make quite clear the difference between the acts of love and the acts of justice. But I would like to pursue the point just a step further and see if I can suggest to you how different, how very, very different human society would be if it were based on love and friendship instead of upon law and justice. I'm always impressed by what seems to me one of the most penetrating insights in Aristotle. The one in which he says, expresses as follows, that when men are friends, there is no need of justice as among them or between them. As between friends, there is no need of justice. Of course, there are no human societies that have ever existed which are based on love and friendship instead of law and justice. Almost all, in fact, I think we could say all historic societies are of a negative sort. They are societies in which justice prevents discord, rather than societies in which love produces concord.
You know, that's a very interesting point. I wonder if you'd mind pursuing it even a little further, please.
I'd be glad to, Mr. Luckman. I think it is an interesting point. And as I do so, to see if I can push this point a little further, make it a little clearer, let me read the passage from Aquinas, from the Summa Theologica, the treatise on charity, the treatise on love, which compares love and justice as causes of peace. And you understand, of course, that what Aquinas means here by peace is the peace of a civil society. And so when he's comparing love and justice as causes of peace, he's also considering love and justice as the causes of society, of what binds men together in society. The passage is as follows. He says, peace, and he might just as well say society, peace is the work of justice indirectly, insofar as justice removes the obstacles to peace. But it is the work of love directly, since love, by its very nature, causes peace, for love is a uniting force. Now, what does this mean? It means, in the first place, that justice, that is, just government, the enforcement of just laws, prevents men from injuring one another, fighting with one another. And it's certainly true that without justice, human societies could not long endure. They would fall apart. For, as has often been said, justice is the bond of men and states. But We must ask, is justice enough to make a society a good society? Is justice enough to make society serve its human purpose? Is a society in which justice prevails good enough for all human interests and ends? Now, your answer to this question depends a little bit on your view of the purpose of society, the reason for its origin, why men associate. If you think that men associate because they're afraid of one another, and they want society to protect them from one another, then you are satisfied if justice prevails and justice holds society together. Then a society built on justice is quite satisfactory for you. But if your view is that men associate in order to perfect themselves, in order to lead the best human lives of which each of them is capable, then it is not quite satisfactory to have only justice. You want love and friendship because love and friendship are required if men are going to help one another through their goodwill, through benefiting one another to lead good lives. Both principles are needed in human society, but only a society of angels could exist on love alone. All human societies need both love and justice, and beyond justice, they are better in proportion as love and friendship prevails more. Does that, on the whole, answer your question?
Yes, indeed it does. Thank you very much.
Good. Now, are we ready for the definition of love? I think we are. But instead of giving you a definition in my own words, I would like to read you from the great books two famous passages, which I think are magnificent, brief, eloquent statements of what love or friendship are. Let me take first a passage from Montaigne. This is from Montaigne's essay on friendship. I've marked the passage. Let me read it to you. Montaigne says, "In true friendship, I give myself to my friend more than I endeavor to attract him to me. I am not only better pleased in doing him service than if he conferred benefit upon me, but moreover, I would rather he should do himself good than me good." That's a perfectly clear statement, is it not, of the benevolence of love, the interest of the lover in the good of the beloved. Now then, let me turn next to a statement in Aristotle's Ethics in Book 9, Chapter 4, the book on friendship, where Aristotle, after the analysis, part of which I've reported to you in this discussion, comes to his effort to say, finally, what a friend is. And this is the way he says it. We define a friend as one who wishes and does what is good for the sake of his friend, as one who wishes his friend to exist and to live for his own sake, which is what mothers wish for their children, and as one who grieves with and rejoices with his friend. And this too, Aristotle says, and this too is found in mothers most of all. It's quite remarkable, although perfectly understandable, that Aristotle should have taken the love of mothers for their children, mother for a child, as the prime example of basic human love, the love which is benevolent and friendly, which involves care and consideration of the other. And I have a picture here which I think better explains why this is so than any words I can use. It is a picture of a mother and a child. Quite a wonderful picture. But what is most wonderful about it is its title, for it is a perfect title for a picture of perfect love. The title of that picture, let's look at it again. The title of that picture is Communication.
Now, Dr. Adler, are we to understand that true love is entirely benevolent, entirely selfless, entirely unselfish, that the lover doesn't require or desire anything for himself, not even to be loved in return? If that's what you mean, then you are thinking and discussing and living in an imaginary world. A world not only without sex, but a world without anything much of human nature in it.
No. I'm not going that far. I'm not going that far. But I am saying this. I'm saying that love can be unselfish, that love can be benevolent, without being entirely selfless. It seems to be quite proper for a lover or a friend to wish some good for himself as well as some good for the person he loves. These two wishes, the wish for the good of the other, the good of the beloved, as well as the wish for my own good, are quite compatible under certain circumstances. Let me see if I can explain how they go together. In the first place, let me point out that proper self-love is really inseparable from true love of another person. One might almost say, unless one has self-respect, genuine, deep self-respect, one hasn't the basis for respecting other persons either. This, I think, is the meaning of that second precept of Christian charity. You know, the second precept of charity doesn't say, love thy neighbor. It doesn't say, love thy neighbor. It says, love thy neighbor as thyself. The emphasis is on as thyself. For it means that one's love of oneself, one's proper self-respect, is the basis and the measure of a genuine love of others. More than that, for the mutuality of love to exist, I must respect in myself, I must value in myself the same excellence that I value in my friend or in the person that I love. Now, when we love another, we wish, as I've been saying many times now, when we love another, we wish them well. We wish some good to befall them. Hence, when in loving another, we also love ourselves, what do we wish for ourselves? What good is it that we are wishing for ourselves in our self-love? I think the answer to this question is we wish to be loved. And with that wish, we wish the joy of love, the joy of companionship, of being in the company of, in the presence of the person we love, of living a common life with that person. Perhaps, ultimately, the joy of perfect union. Let me summarize what, in some sense, I've been developing as the wishes of love in a chart which sets these wishes forth in the order 1, 2, 3. Let me show you that chart. The wishes of love are threefold. First, to benefit the other. This is the wish which expresses goodwill. This is only the beginning of love. This is not its full fruition. Second wish of love is to be loved in return. To be loved in return. And with that wish follows the third and the deepest, the ultimate wish of love, to enjoy the closest union with the beloved.
You know, I'm sorry, but that word union still bothers me. Because I can't help asking you just once more, in which world are we discussing? The real world or the imaginary world without sex?
Well, I would like to propose that we try to understand union, the union of love, quite apart from sex. Hence, please try now to go once more with me into the imaginary world, where we've been constructing in order to understand love as separate from sex and desire, a world without sex. And in that world, let's see if we can, eliminating all physical contacts, as what sort of union do we mean when we say that the lover wishes to be united or to have almost perfect union with his beloved, with his friend? The answer, I think, is that what is wished for is to be acquired or to be attained through compassion, through sympathy, through sharing and liking the same thing, through all the acts of leading a common life, and perhaps most deeply of all, through knowing and understanding the other person well, through knowledge and understanding. Now that word knowledge gives us a clue. to what sort of union is involved in love apart from sex. Or, there are two ways in which men possess things, physically and spiritually. We possess them physically when we consume them or use them. We possess them spiritually when we behold them or know them. Now, loving is like knowing. Love is like knowledge. The things we love we possess in the same way as we possess them when we know them. But love, though it's like knowledge and is united to its object as the knower is to the known, is much better than all the forms of intellectual knowledge. It's a much deeper union than that. That, I think, is why St. Thomas, speaking of man's relation to God, says, it is better to love God than to know him, and it is better to know things than to love them. Now let me conclude this discussion with a letter that we received, which I think raises a question that it is worth facing at this point. I have this letter in my file. The letter asks, or I shouldn't say that. The letter says that, quotes a contemporary writer as saying that love is merely a cultural accretion that is in no way essential to man's existence, and that the human race will sometime probably learn to dispense with it. The writer of this letter asks for my comment on that statement. I am glad to give it. I think the statement quoted is quite broad. For it seems to me that the human being's need for love is the deepest need of human nature, because man is by nature social. Now, we are social persons, not just social animals. That's why we cannot be satisfied by herding together as the gregarious animals do. We cannot be satisfied by being useful to one another merely, or by giving each other pleasure. We, because we are social persons, deeply want to share one another's lives. How can this be done? How can this be done? Only in one way. One word gives the answer. Conversation. Love and the union of love is impossible without conversation. Each of us is alone. Each of us is quite lonely. Without the communication of love, without the conversations, the heart-to-heart talks, which are love's way of achieving union, each of us would be as isolated, as shut out from one another, as animals are, even when they are herding together physically most closely. Only the communion of love, produced by the conversations of lovers, overcomes our human isolation and our human aloneness or loneliness. Now, everything I have said today about love as friendship indicates, I think, that love can exist in a world without sex. This very last remark about conversation as the way in which lovers become united makes this quite clear. But we also know, I think, that friendly love exists in the real world, where it is often mixed or fused with carnal love, erotic love, or sexual love. That is our problem as we go on next time with this discussion. The problem of understanding how sexual love, or I should put it this way, the problem of understanding how love can be sexual and at the same time truly human love. I hope this problem catches your interest and that you'll be with us as we go on next time. Thank you very much.